Chapter 19. It rained incessantly over the next few days, which didn't trouble Julie and Jimmy at all. But I sat alone in the house as they disappeared into their own world, only appearing for meals. Jimmy drove her to appointments for scans, including one for her leg, which was the trial's first response to complaints of the pain in the leg. She had been given an appointment for the following Friday to see an orthopaedic specialist in the city who would view the scans and provide a prognosis. They went off in fine spirits, both of them, seemingly detached from the purpose of their journey, and completed their outing with a trip to the movies. The rain and my inactivity compounded my increasing sense of isolation. The only escape was the smoking area on the little black veranda. Sodden and cold, the ashtray full of water, and my phone. The trial had at last given her permission for one trip home, and we had planned to make our move in the following week, but it depended on the outcome at the surgeon. I asked Julia if Jimmy could drive my car home, and the two of us could fly together. But she was adamant that he was to fly with us, and he couldn't be expected to drive alone. I wasn't happy and reminded her that I had undertaken the drive more than once. My brother rang. He understood my frustrations and advised me to go home alone for the weekend. I felt selfish considering my own needs, but there was no doubt that Julia had what she needed at that time. Jimmy could look after her, earn his keep for a little while. The rain got heavier, record-breaking according to the newscast, with the eastern suburbs afloat in the deluge. But on the Friday I set off on the bus and then the train to catch my flight, only to discover some error in the booking arrangement. I had no money, as I had given my credit card and spare cash to Julia, who was somewhere at a hospital in the city attending her appointment. There was no point in returning to Jim and Bernadette's, as Julia had the key and there was no covering on the front porch. Locked out, with no way of going forward, I decided that at least the airport offered protection from the weather, and that I should wait until Julia's appointment was over and find my way across the city so I could link up with the two of them. Circumstances had taken control. I was settled in for a long wait when a colleague from school appeared. She had just attended her mother's funeral, which was apparently in the suburb where Jim and Bernadette lived, and she had time to kill. Another colleague at home was also nursing her husband, who had been diagnosed with cancer 6 weeks after Julia, and we spoke to her on the phone. I caught up with all the news at school. A brief break from my world after all. "She's back," was Julia's only comment as I waded into the car. Her report from the surgeon was brief. There was nothing he could do. The melanoma was exerting such intense pressure on the bones in her leg that there would remain the constant possibility of the bone shattering. He suggested a splint or a wheelchair. There was no need to wait for the following week to go home, no treatment forthcoming. She was dismissive of the significance of the surgeon's conclusions, reporting only Jimmy's clowning in the surgery, the two of them on an outing, me in the back. I spent the evening booking airline tickets and arranging the use of a wheelchair, only to learn that the airlines would require a doctor's certificate in order to transport Julia. I notified Emma to hire a wheelchair for arrival, and finally got us on a flight without a certificate, and went off to bed prepared for an early rise, so that I could repack the car whose contents were spread throughout the house. The happy couple appeared for a late breakfast and the remnants of the cleaning. I asked Jimmy if he would mind parking the car in the street, as Jim and Bernadette were due to return and would need their car space. He asked if it was safe to leave my car in the street and all my possessions. A surprising question, given that I had no other option. I did understand her reluctance to take the car home. Clearly, she was not yet ready to accept that there was not going to be a flat, that contents of the car not needed for a future she was not going to have. No real acceptance of what the surgeon's verdict implied. The cancellation of the flight was announced after Julia was installed in her wheelchair, but the consolation was the opportunity of another flight with another company. My credit card was empty, having spent the last of it on the cancelled flights, and I had only enough cash for 2 fares. A stressful moment, but by some chance Jimmy had enough money in his pocket for his flight, and we would only have to weather the extra time at the airport. He was undisturbed by any of the proceedings. Julia, however, was anxious about arriving home in a wheelchair at the airport in which she had worked. It seemed such a strange concern, but I suppose it was an admission of her condition.